Vakratunda Mahakaya Suryakoti Samaprabha Nirvignam Kurume Deva Sarvakaryeshu Sarvada. Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Friends, Namaste. On behalf of Team Param Vedanta, I extend one and all a hearty welcome for today's 62nd session of DISHA. DISHA, a series aimed to lead us into an inward journey for discovery of inner strength and happiness. Today, our Param Vedanta teacher, Dr. Satyanarayana Lale, shall explain from two texts, namely from verses 1 to 11 of Bhagavad Gita, 15th chapter, Purushottama Yoga, covering three topics: description of samsara, means of liberation, and Brahma as jiva. From Tatvabodha, under subtopic, he will explain Sadhana Chatushtaya Sadhana Chatushtaya, the fourfold qualification. This presentation is followed by a teaching quiz to be presented by Dr. Ashwini. Dr. Timmappa Hegde sir shall give us an introduction and recap to today's topics. Srimati Lakshmi Prakash will commence today's session by chanting and explaining the popular sloka Saraswati Namastubhyam. Srimati Lakshmi, please.
Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Om Shri Saraswati Namo Namaha. Saraswati Namastubhyam Varade Kamarupini Vidyarambam Karishyami Siddhir Bhavatu Me Sada. This is one of the most popular shloka dedicated to Goddess Saraswati Devi. This is because almost every student learns these lyrics and usually recites it daily before starting his education. This tradition roots back to the Gurukula system of education, where the Saraswati Dhyana shlokas are recited daily. In Hinduism, Goddess Saraswati is considered as the goddess of education, learning, music, arts, and even speech. She is also the consort of Brahma and one of the three Devi, along with the goddesses of Lakshmi and Parvati. The earliest mention of Saraswati as a Bhagavati is in the Rig Veda. She has remained significant as a goddess from the Vedic period through modern times of Hindu tradition. She is generally shown to have 4 arms, holds the Vedas, a mala, a water pot, and a musical instrument, veena. Each of these items have symbolic meaning in Hinduism. Saraswati Namastubhyam is a prayer practiced in the morning prayers in the schools. It is a prayer to Goddess Saraswati, the giver of knowledge and wisdom. She is a force of nature defied. She is said to be responsible for the work of intelligence. Bless me so that I begin my studies successfully. May there be more accomplishments. The meaning of this shloka, Saraswati, goddess deity ruling over the realm of intelligence. Namastubhyam, salutations to you. Varade, giver of boons. Kamarupini, she who brings desires to fruition, or beauty of wish-fulfilling nature. Vidyarambam, beginning of studies. Karishyami, I am going to do it. Siddhir, power of accomplishing a task. Bhavatu, bless. Me, Sada, always. Hari Om. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Lakshmi, for introducing this very popular Saraswati prayer. Sadashiva Samarambam Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Pariyantam Vande Guru Paramparam. Om. In today's Disha, we come to the 15th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, and in my own understanding, this is the climax the Bhagavad Gita goes to. The 19th verse of this chapter goes like this: Yo mam eva asammodaha janati Purushottama. The whole objective of the Gita, the whole objective of a spiritual seeker, is to clearly understand asammodaha, without any doubts, to be very clear, Janati, to know who is this Purushottama. You must understand the Bhagavad Gita is a Gita. It is poetry. And in poetry, there is a lot of fluidity to interpret it in different ways, depending upon one's perspective. However, we go through the Advaita school of Vedanta, as directed by Adi Shankara and given to us by Swami Paramarthananda. And there we would understand Purushottama in a very, very specific way. Before we come to the 19th verse where Sri Krishna tells us that you must know Purushottama, the entire chapter, and I want you to be very attentive, Sri Krishna describes certain qualities of a Purushottama. And in the 17th verse, he describes what is this Uttama Purusha, or who is this higher Purusha. To reach the higher Purusha, he described there are two other Purushas. One is called Kshara Purusha, that which undergoes a decay. Akshara Purusha, that does not undergo any modification. So one is the perishable universe and the other is Maya. And then he describes there is, in addition to all of these, there is one more Purusha, which we can call it as Uttama Purusha. And in this 17th verse, Sri Krishna describes Uttama Purusha as that which is pervading all the three worlds, that which pervades the entire universe. Not only that, it gives existence, it lends existence. After making all this conclusion, Sri Krishna makes a certain conclusion. And he says, instead of saying consciousness, which lends existence, is Uttama Purusha, Sri Krishna identifies, which is also right, as that consciousness as his true nature. And finally concludes that the aim of every spiritual seeker is the knowledge of Purushottama as one's true nature. All of us fully agree that Sri Krishna is Purushottama. It is impossible to believe that I can be Purushottama because I know my own limitations. I know how limited I am as body and mind. But then the aim of every spiritual seeker is to say that the essential nature of Sri Krishna is also my essential nature. And this is what is called Jivatma, Paramatma, Aikyam. And this is brought about through all our approaches in the Upanishads and the Bhagavad Gita as looked from Advaita Vedanta. Let us look from a Sanskrit grammar approach. Uttama Purusha represents first person, I in English. Madhyama Purusha represents second person, you. Prathama Purusha represents a third person. Now, the Uttama Purusha, which can be reversed as Purushottama, can also represent I. Now, if we study the Gita, you will see that what was described in the 13th chapter as Kshetrajna, in the 14th chapter as Gunatita, and in the 15th chapter, what is Atma or consciousness is none other than Purushottama. In the earlier verses, which we will study in this class, that means one of the concluding verses, the 10th verses, Dr. Satyanarayana will describe, Vimuda na anupashyanti pashyanti jnana chakshusa. You are keeping your eyes open. And even with your eyes open, if you're not able to see me, then he will call you not just a muda or a fool or a vimuda. This whole world is none other than Isha Vasya Idam Sarvam. The whole material world is seen as existent or Sat. And the whole world of beings as a combination of Sat and Chit. And therefore, I need to be able to discover in the inanimate world Brahman in the form of Sat, in the animate world of plants and animals and human beings as Brahman as Sat and Chit, and in my own self, Brahman as Sat, Chit and Ananda. We will listen to Dr. Satyanarayana, who will summarize the first half of this chapter for us. Dr. Satyanarayana, please.
Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Today, we'll be going through Bhagavad Gita, chapter 15. So, Purushottama Yoga. And as Dr. Hegde sir has clearly told, this is the peak of Gita. Next slide. As we have seen earlier, Kshetragna in chapter 13, and Gunatita in chapter 14, and none other than Brahman or Atma. Everything means the same. That is what giving the quality of Purushottama or Purushottama himself. And this chapter contains the essence of Upanishads, mainly taken from Kathopanishad, Mundakopanishad, and even Chandogya Upanishad, 8th chapter. Chapter 15, the Purushottama Yoga, is an important and a very popular chapter of Gita. This is only 20 verses in this particular chapter, quite small, but it is often used as prayer verse before taking food. And why? You will come to know little later. Samsara is entanglement in the web of anatma by losing sight of atma tattvam in ourselves. The first 2.5 verses describe samsara so that the seeker will know samsara nivrutti or the moksha. And as we know, the moksha is nothing but freedom from samsara. Only when the seeker understands the value of moksha, he will turn his attention to the means of attaining moksha. And the value for the means is directly proportional to the value of the end. And to describe this samsara, Krishna compares samsara to a huge peepal tree or ashwatha tree. Ashwatha. This means that which is constantly changing. Before we get into the verse proper, let me remind you the fundamental laws of Vedanta, which we have seen several times in our previous sessions. I am different from whatever I experience. So whatever I experience is anatma, I am atma. This understanding is atma, anatma, viveka, which is discrimination. And this has been described previously in chapter 13 as well as kshetra, kshetragna, viveka also. Second law, all attributes or gunas I experience belong to the experienced object and not to me, the experiencer, the subject, the atma. I am the gunatitha with no gunas, as we have seen in 14th chapter. So I as atma am nirguna. With this background of chapter 13 and 14, let us get into chapter 15, Purushottama. This chapter has been divided conveniently into subtopics. Chapter initially talks about samsara varananam, the description of samsara, and then moksha sadhanani, the spiritual disciplines leading to liberation. Brahmana sarvatmatam means Brahman is in the form of everything. And Brahmana Purushottamatvat means Brahman means Purushottama. Then lastly talks about Brahma Jnana Phala, or the benefits of knowledge of Brahman. Our attention in this chapter is to clearly know who is Purushottama. The chapter begins with comparison of samsara to Ashvatha Tree. And this comparative analogy of samsara to Ashvatha Tree has already been done in Kathopanishad also. Swamiji has described 10 common features listed like this. Mahatvam. Both are huge and vast. The samsara as well as Ashvatha Tree. Adyanta Rahitam. Adi Anta Rahitam means the beginning and the end of both are not traceable because it is a cyclic process. Anirvachaniyatvam. Logically, it is uncategorizable. Is it the cause or effect? Is it fate or free will? We do not know. And we call it Maya. Moolatvam. Both have got the root. The support of the tree is invisible root, and Bhagavan also is invisible. Shakatvam. Branches at different levels in tree, so is higher, middle, and lower lokas in universe. Paranavatvam means full of leaves. As leaves have photosynthesis, even the karma kanda protect samsara and generate karma phalams. Phalavatvam, which means bears fruit which may be sweet, sour, or mixed. Samsara vriksha also gives sukha, dukkha, or mixed phalani. Ashrayavatvam. People tree or Ashvatha tree gives nesting site for birds. And similarly, the jivas nestle in the swarga, manusya, or even adholokas. Chalanavatvam, movement brought about by powerful wind. Similarly, the samsara tree are swayed by the wind of prarabdha karma. And lastly, chedyatvam, which can be uprooted. Similarly, the huge samsara tree can be uprooted with dispassion, which come with jnana. Now, let us see verse 15.1. In this verse, Lord Krishna speaks of the eternal Ashvatha tree, which is upside down with its roots above and branches below. Its roots are going upwards. That is how it is described, urdhva moolam, originating from God, nourished and supported by him. The trunk and branches which are extending downwards, adha shakham, encompass all the life forms from different abodes of the material realm. Its leaves are Vedic mantras, chandasi, that is how it is described, which describes rituals, ceremonies, and its rewards. The leaves nourishes the material existence of souls and perpetuate the continuous cycle of life and death. And due to this continuity, the beginning and the end are not experienced by the souls. Hence, this tree form of the world is avyayam, as it is mentioned in the verse, eternal. The intention of describing this tree in the Vedas was to make us understand that we are beyond the cycle of life and death, and we should work towards cutting this tree down. And for the same purpose, Lord Krishna has mentioned that one who understands the secret of cutting this tree of samsara is the knower of Vedas. The universe or Ashvatha tree, the comparison can be summarized like this. The roots are urdhva moolam compared to Brahman. The branches or the adhama shakam, which are compared to lokas. Leaves are nothing but comparison to karma kanda of the Vedas. Fruits are pleasures and pain, and birds or jiva are all the sentient beings. In the verse 15.2, Lord Krishna goes on to explain that while in the human form, the soul performs the karmas, which is the trunk of the tree and its branches or the shakas, and expand both upwards and downwards. Based on how the soul performed in its past and present form, it is reborn. If it led a virtuous life, when we reborn, it moves upward branches, which denote celestial abodes. In case the soul was involved in a sinful act, in the next birth, it gets degraded to downward branches, which are for the animal species. Similar to how water irrigates the tree, the three modes of material nature or the three gunas irrigate this eternal tree of material existence. The sense of objects generated by these gunas are like buds in the tree, which sprout, causing further growth and material desires. To satiate these desires, a living being performs karma, but these desires are unending and keep on increasing. Eventually, the soul gets further entangled into this web of material consciousness. Next verse, next slide. So the Brahman is compared to the primary root of samsara tree. The entire visible universe to the trunk and branches, and the karma kanda, the ritualistic part of the Vedas, to the leaves which perpetuate the samsara vriksha. And mulani anusantatani, the secondary roots spread all over, and those are raga dvesha. And karmanu bandhini, the consequence of raga dvesha, vasanas are varieties of karmas. Hereafter, from the second half of verse 15.3, Lord Krishna has revealed the requirements for the process to surrender to the Supreme Lord who is at the base of this enigmatic Ashvatha tree. Samsara Nivrutti Upaya is given from this onwards. And for that, Krishna talks about 4 methods or 4 disciplines. The first step is asanga or vairagyam. Next, he talks about parimagitavyam or Vedanta vichara, the inquiry into the root of samsara vriksha. Next, he tells prapadye, meaning sharanagati or surrender to the devotion. Lastly, he talks about sadguna or developing a healthy, refined mind. This huge tree can be cut with dispassion, says Lord Krishna. The remedy for the soul's never-ending suffering is detachment. The acts of detachment can cut the roots of desires which are nourished by the 3 modes of material nature. The Lord explains that these acts of detachment can only be developed with the knowledge of the self. With detachment, one can stop further growth of the tree roots, and due to lack of nourishment, the tree starts to wither. Therefore, the only way to cut down this huge Ashvatha tree is by totally surrendering to Supreme Lord and taking his refuge. The real form of this tree is not perceived in the world, neither its beginning nor its continued existence. But this deep-rooted Ashvatha tree must be cut with a strong axe of detachment. Then one must search for the base of the tree, which is the Supreme Lord, from whom streamed forth the activities of the universe a long time ago. Upon taking refuge in him, one will not return to this world again. This verse 15.5, Krishna says, those who are free from vanity and delusion, who have overcome the evil of attachment, who dwell constantly on the self and on God, who are free from desire to enjoy the senses and are beyond the dualities of pleasure and pain, such liberated personalities attain my eternal abode. This verse talks about the values or sadgunas for developing a healthy, refined mind. These values or sadgunas are freedom from pride, freedom from delusion, conquering evil of attachment, committed to spiritual pursuit, free from desires, and ability to withstand the opposites. Brahman is original consciousness, or body-mind complex is the reflecting medium, and jiva is the reflected consciousness, as we have seen in earlier classes. And freedom from samsara can be achieved by a strong, firm mind through the weapon of asanga or vairagyam. Anusanga sastrena dridhena chitva. That is how verse it is mentioned. How to develop this strong, firm mind? Krishna mentions 4 mandatory sadhanas, as we have seen. Dispassion or vairagya, and this is freedom from addiction to become gunatitha, as we have seen in chapter 14. Sharanagati, the bhakti, a surrender to the devotion, accepting choiceless situation, this is Sharanagati. Sadguna or the refined mind, and this is accepting choiceless situation and developing virtues that are conducive to the Vedanta for spiritual growth, as we have seen in 13th chapter. And Vedanta vichara or the study of Vedantic scriptures for the length of time under a competent guru is what is required. Out of the 4 sadhanas, as we have seen, samsara nivrutti upaya, vairagya, sharanagati, and sadguna are secondary sadhanas, and this will make one jnana yogyata. And from then, Vedanta vichara, which becomes our primary sadhana, is actually Jnana Yoga. Verse 15.6. This verse is Brahma Lakshana Shloka. This verse says, neither the sun nor the moon nor the fire can illumine that supreme abode of mine. Having gone there, one does not return to this material world again. This is an important definition of Brahman, based on this Upanishadic mantra occurring in Kathopanishad and even Mundakopanishad as well. Krishna points out that Brahman is the pure consciousness which is formless and all-pervading entity which objectifies everything and cannot be objectified by anyone. This consciousness that witnessed Chaitanyam is Brahman. With the previous verse, 15.6, now the topic of moksha upaya, which is fourfold discipline, is over. And from this verse up to verse 11, Brahman alone is in the form of universe is said. This verse 15.7 says, the embodied souls in this material world are my eternal fragmental parts, but bound by material nature, they are struggling with 6 senses, including the mind. Coming on to the Karya Karana Sambandha, we have seen this couple of times earlier also. So what is, when we look at furniture, actually, do we look at chair, table or so? Everything is nothing but wood. When we look at so many articles, materials made up of clay, be it a pot, it is actually, pot is nama rupa, whereas the main component or the main part of it, out of it is made up of, is clay. And when it comes to so many ornaments, bangle, chain, all these are different nama rupas, but the primary existence is that of gold. So it is gold which is all through the ornaments, it is clay which is all through this pot, and it is wood which is all through in the furniture. As next slide, when we take this as an example, the sun reflects through a mirror, and that reflected light can be focused onto a dark room. So sun becomes the primary source, whereas mirror becomes a reflecting medium, and through that reflecting medium, a dark room can be lighted up. So with this example, Swamiji gives an analogy that sun is original consciousness or the Brahman, and the reflecting medium or the mirror is nothing but our body-mind complex, and the dark room or the reflected consciousness is nothing but the jiva. And only one original consciousness is required, but there can be many reflecting mediums. So that is how Paramatma is one and Jivatmas are many. And you may require combination of both original consciousness and reflected medium to illumine this Jagat. Next slide. When we see this bulb, lighted bulb, okay, what we see here is the bulb as such, but actually what is lighted here is the filament. But we always take it for granted the invisible electricity which enlivens this bulb. This bulb does not have its brightness of its own. Bulb is Stula Sharira, and the brightness of the bulb is a borrowed brightness, and there is Sukshma Sharira called the filament in it. And it is this invisible electricity that enlivens the filament. Verse 15.8 says, as the air carries fragrance from place to place, so does the embodied soul carry the mind and senses with it when it leaves an old body and enters new one. Here, what happens after death is being explained. Sense organs are illumined by the mind, and the mind in turn is illumined by the consciousness. And Brahman alone is available in body-mind complex as jiva. The sentiency or life in body-mind complex is borrowed from Brahma Chaitanyam. At the time of death, mind quits the body. At the time of death, jiva carries along with it all senses and the mind. And in this verse, Vayu or breeze is compared to jiva and the flower to a physical body. The fragrance is compared to Sukshma Sharira, the invisible mind. Next verse 15.9, Krishna says, the invisible Chidabhasa, the reflected consciousness, carries the entire Sukshma Sharira, the Pancha Jnanendriyas, the Pancha Karmendriyas, Pancha Prana, Mana, and Buddhi. It is not the physical organ, but the perceptive power that is carried to another human body and placed in respective golakams. Resorting to all these sense organs, jiva will start experiencing the new environment depending on Purva Janma, Punya, and Papa. Therefore, experiences reveal the presence of life, which is Chidabhasa, which reveals the presence of Brahman, which is all-pervading consciousness. Next verse 15.10. In this verse, Krishna, the verse goes like this: the ignorant do not perceive the soul as it resides in the body and as it enjoys sense objects, nor do they perceive it when it departs. But those who possess the eye of knowledge can behold it. This is what Sir was highlighting in the introduction. Krishna says, for a discerning mind, Brahman is recognizable in every activity of the individual, in every function of the jiva. Just like invisible electricity is discerned in every function of electrical gadget. And Swami Paramarthananda ji gives us an analogy. When there is power cut, mother asks the child to see if there is power in neighbor's house. That is how the tendency is. And the child comes to neighbor's house and sees the light on and the fan running and asks neighbor if there is power in their house. A child can do that. But if a grown-up person asks, we will all laugh. Similarly, an immature person can ask for proof of God. But for a mature person, the very question is a meaningless, ridiculous question. Mature people appreciate God in every breath. This is what is told in verse 15.10. Next verse 15.11 says, the striving yogis too are unable to realize the soul enshrined in the body. However, those whose minds are not purified cannot cognize it, even though they strive to do so. Discriminate, discerning, mature yogis see Brahman in everything. And this is what is described. Achetasa, indiscriminate and unrefined mind, unintelligent people see only the materialistic aspect and never recognize the all-pervading consciousness. With this, our part of Purushottama Yoga comes to an end. And let us get into Tatvabodha portion, Sadhana Chatushtaya. Next slide. Tatvabodha. This serves two purposes. It gives you the method of self-inquiry leading to self-knowledge. It introduces technical terms required for conducting self-inquiry. The textbook of Tatvabodha begins with qualifications required for self-inquiry. And this qualification is presented as Sadhana Chatushtaya Sampatthi. The fourfold qualifications, or the 4 Ds given: Viveka, discrimination; vairagya, dispassion; mumukshutvam, desire; and shatka sampatti, the discipline. Let us see one by one. Viveka, or discrimination, is sense of judgment or the right understanding. Nitya, anitya, vastu viveka, the differentiation of impermanent and permanent, ephemeral and eternal. This is discrimination. Understanding that Brahman alone can give permanent security and support and not the world is viveka. And this is discrimination or viveka. Vairagyam, or dispassion. Having understood that the world cannot be relied upon for security and support, gradually withdrawing from this world and stopping leaning on the world for security or support is called dispassion. Mumukshutvam, or desire for liberation. This is desire for freedom from problems caused by depending on the world or anitya vastu leaning. The basic problem will be insecurity, worry, fear, frustration, disappointment, anger, hatred, and like. All psychological problems are caused by depending on the undependable. It is not the problem with anitya vastu, but my mistake that I expected permanence out of this impermanence. Next is Shatka Sampatthi, or the sixfold discipline. Sama, or tranquility or mind control. Next is Dhamma, or the sense control. Uparama, introspectiveness, reduction of extrovert activities so that one will get some quality time for self-enquiry. That is Uparama. Next is Titiksha, or the forbearance, meaning mental toughness to withstand all forms of challenges in life. This is also called as psychological immunity in ups and downs, Titiksha. Next is Shraddha, or the trust, the faith in scriptures, also in Guru, who helps us understand and who helps in the study of scripture. Being open-minded until things are understood clearly. That humility involves freedom from intellectual arrogance. And Samadhanam, or the concentration, meaning focusing capacity. Out of this, the first three qualifications, the discrimination, dispassion, and desire, are acquired and nourished by Karma Yoga discipline. The fourth qualification is acquired through Upasana Yoga. Karma Yoga and Upasana Yoga together will give Sadhana Chatushtaya Sampatthi and make you Jnana Yogyata. And Jnana Yoga gives Jnanam, and Jnanam gives Moksha. The beginning portion of the scripture known as Veda Purva deals with Jnana Yogyata Prapti through Karma and Upasana. And the last portion, Veda Anta, deals with Jnana Prapti or attainment of Jnanam through Jnana Yoga. In addition to Karma Yoga, next slide. In addition to Karma Yoga and Upasana Yoga, what is required to understand or what is required to acquire the Sadhana Chatushtaya Sampatthi is an ethical life in which person follows moral values. The 10 commandments, Yama, Niyama. Okay, these are divided into two groups. What is to be avoided? Himsa Varjanam, non-violence. Asatya Varjanam, non-lying. Steya Varjanam, non-stealing. Maithuna Varjanam, inappropriate sex. And Parigraha Varjanam, or non-possessiveness. And what is to be followed? Saucham, or the cleanliness. Santosha, contentment. Tapaha, or self-denial. Swadhyaya, scriptural studies. And Pranidhanam, or surrender to the Lord. Hari Om.
Thank you very much, Dr. Satya, for giving us an excellent overview of the first 11 verses of this chapter, the great chapter of Purushottama Yoga. You also touched on the preparatory qualifications from Tatvabodha on Sadhana Chatushtaya Sampatthi. Let us see how much we have understood. Now, the whole DISHA is to be able to study once again with the view that we have understood it. And we have a teaching quiz that will be conducted to us by Dr. Ashwini, and Dr. Anupama will answer these questions. Dr. Ashwini, please.
Thank you, sir. Hari Om. I thank Dr. Anupama for agreeing to do this voluntarily. So the first question here is, who is Purushottama in Purushottama Yoga? Your options are Shri Krishna, Shri Rama, Hiranyagarbha, Brahman, or is it Ishvara?
Brahman.
Brahman. Brahman is the right answer. Next question is, samsara. Samsara is compared to dash. Kalpa Vriksha, Sanskrit language, two birds chirping, or is it Ashvatha Tree?
Ashvatha Tree.
Ashvatha Tree. Absolutely right, ma'am. Next question is, example of Ashvatha Tree is taken from which Upanishad? And your options are, is it Mundaka, Mandukya, Ishavasya, or Kathopanishad?
Upanishad.
Yeah. Is it? Yeah, it is Kathopanishad, right? Now here we have a little bit of match the following. We've seen the similarities between samsara and Ashvatha tree. There's a big, huge, table that goes through that. I just asked 4 of them. You have to match it. Mahatvam.
Very huge and vast.
Very huge and vast. Okay. Adyantarahitam.
Cannot trace the beginning and end.
Cannot trace the beginning and end. Anirvachaniyam.
Cannot be categorized.
Cannot be categorized. Moolavatvam.
Has roots and God is the root.
Or God is the root. Yeah. The, next slide, sir. Yeah. In this slide, I have just put all the things that Dr. Satyanarayana just spoke about. The Mahatvam, very huge and vast. Adyantarahitam, cannot trace beginning and end. Anirvachaniyam, it cannot be categorized. Moolavatvam, has roots or God is the root. Sakavatvam, has many branches. Parnavatvam, leaves or Vedas. Phalavatvam, bears fruits. Ashrayavatvam, gives support. Chalanavatvam, moves. Chedyatvam, it can be cut. Okay. The next question. This is verse number 15.1. Here, Bhagavan Uvacha, Urdhva Moolam Madashakam Ashvattam Praharavyayam Chandansi Yasya Parnani Yastam Veda Savedavat. In this verse, what are the leaves compared to? Are they compared to Karma Kanda of Vedas, Jnana Kanda, Panchabhutas, or Sanchita Karma?
The Karma Kanda of Vedas.
Karma Kanda of Vedas. Yes, absolutely right. This was also there in the presentation. The roots are compared to, or the Urdhva Moolam is Brahman. Branches, Adhamashakam, also Brahman. Leaves are compared to Karma Kanda of Vedas. Fruits to pleasure and pain. Birds, jiva, or all sentient beings. Okay, the next question. Which one of these is not samsara nivritti upaya as per verses 15.3, 4 and 5? Options are viveka, discrimination, dispassion or vairagyam, sharanagatihi, bhakti, surrender to devotion, sadguna, refined mind, or brahma vichara.
Samsara nivritti. The answer is viveka.
Yes, ma'am. Answer is viveka, discrimination. Okay, the next question. In asanga shastrena dridena chittva, what is the weapon that one has to use to cut samsara?
Vairagyam.
Yes, ma'am. It is vairagyam. Yes, it is vairagyam. Next one, the Tatvabodha set of questions. What are the 4-fold qualifications that we just saw?
Discipline, discrimination, desire, and dispassion. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. So the answers are Viveka, Vairagya, Mumukshatvam, Shatka Sampatthi. Viveka, discrimination. Vairagya, dispassion. Mumukshatvam, desire. Shatka Sampatthi, discipline. Okay. The next question, again, it is similar to this. Oh, we've already, yeah. So the match the following again. Viveka
is discrimination.
Yes, ma'am.
Vairagya is dispassion. Mumukshutvam is desire. And Shatka Sampatthi is discipline.
Yes, absolutely right, ma'am. Absolutely right. So the next question is, what are the 6-fold disciplines? The Shatka Sampatthi.
First is Shama or mind control. Dhamma, sense control. Uparama is introvertedness. Then Samadhana is Chitta Ekagrita, one-pointedness of the mind. Then Shraddha or faith.
Tiksha and Shraddha.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. So it is Shama, Dhamma, Uparama, Titiksha, Shraddha, and Samadhana. Again, we have a similar match the following kind of the question. Next one, please. So can you please match it now? Shamaha is?
Sama is mind control, Dhamma is sense control, Uparama is being introspective, and
Yes, ma'am.
Diksha forbearance, Shraddha is trust, and
Yes, ma'am.
Samadhana is concentration.
Extremely good. Yes, that is what it is, ma'am. Shama is sense control. Dhamma is mind control. Uparama, introspectiveness. Titiksha is forbearance. Shraddha, trust. And Samadhanam is concentration. And yeah, the next question is, all of the following are acquired and nourished by Karma Yoga, except which one of these? Is it discrimination, discipline, dispassion, or desire? It is discipline. Discipline alone is acquired by Upasana Yoga, and the rest three are from Karma Yoga. Yes. The next question. As per scriptures, which of the following is not a yama? Yama and niyamas is
Santosha.
not a yama.
Santosha.
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely right. Himsa, asatya, steya, parigraha, or niyama, santosha. I mean, yamas and santosha is. Yeah. Absolutely right. Thank you so much. Thank you, sir. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Lakshmiji, for the divine shloka, Dr. Satyanarayana for your excellent presentation, Dr. Ashwini and Dr. Anupama for the educative teaching quiz, a quiz aimed to remind us and emphasize the key aspects of today's topic. Hearty thanks to Dr. Thimmappa Hegde sir for giving us the key aspects. Most importantly, thank you, friends, for your active participation. Friends, remember to log in on Monday, the 5th June 2023 at 6:45 p.m. sharp for the remaining verses of the 15th chapter. Dhanyavada and Shubharatri. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om.